From the WKAR studios at Michigan State University, the Debate for Governor 2006, with candidates Governor Jennifer Granholm and Dick DeVos. Production of the Debate for Governor 2006 is made possible by a grant from the Rossman Group, a full-service Lansing-based public relations firm providing consulting services to a broad range of local and statewide clients. And now, Senior Capital Correspondent Tim Skubic.
Thank you very much, and welcome to this first Debate for Governor. We have with us tonight in the studio the two major party candidates, and they are
Jennifer Granholm,
Dick DeVos.
Candidates, welcome to our forum here tonight. The minority party candidates were not invited because they did not meet the requirements set forth by the Board of Directors of the Michigan Association of Public Broadcasters. Joining me tonight to help ask the questions is Charlie Kane from the Detroit News. Charlie, nice to have you here.
Nice to be here.
Candidates, as you know, there are no rules, so let's begin. Mr. DeVos, should Michigan have a law making it illegal for a candidate to lie in their commercials? And if we had such a law tonight, would your opponent be in trouble with that law?
Well, Tim, this is the political season, and we've certainly seen the campaign rhetoric fly, and certainly some of the campaign rhetoric has been disappointing and certainly has been negative, and that's very unfortunate. I think the people of Michigan deserve better, and the people of Michigan deserve the facts, and they deserve the facts to lead them to an appropriate conclusion. And so I would certainly hope that we would continue to move forward to improve the ethics in this state, both within those who serve in government, but also those who attempt to run and serve as candidates.
Have the commercials crossed the truth line?
Tim, the commercials that have been run by my campaign, I'm very comfortable with and very confident about.
Her commercials, sir.
And I stand behind. The commercials that the governor's campaign has run have been just disappointing, frankly, in that they have taken disparate facts and attempted to mislead the people of Michigan to an erroneous conclusion. And that's just, it's unfortunate and it's disappointing, Tim.
Governor, guilty?
Yeah, he's guilty. In fact, there's a commercial that he's just beginning to air today, and I'll give you an example of this. In the commercial that he's airing today, he says explicitly that I never met with Honda when I was in Japan. That is an absolute falsehood. I've been to Japan 2 times. The first time I went to Japan, I met with executives at Honda, at Tokyo, in Tokyo. I've got pictures on my website of me meeting with Japanese officials while I was in Tokyo when I was in Japan. It is an outright falsehood. So yeah, he would be guilty as charged.
Was it the second trip, though, Japan, that you did not meet with the Honda people, which is when the whole issue?
Right, no, but listen, he says in that ad that I went to Japan 2 years in a row. That when I was in Japan, I never met with Honda. My team met with them the second trip. The first trip, I met with Honda in Tokyo. And when I got back from those 2 trips, I had brought back 22 companies, 1,000 jobs, over $200 million in investment. Now, let me just say, Tim, this is an example, I think, of what happens in a political season where people absolutely distort. In this case, it's an outright lie, and I encourage people to go to my website at granholmforgovernor.com. You can see the photographs of me meeting with Honda on the website. But I do want to say this, that in this political season, I do think it's important for people to know the facts. And when, in this case, I went to Asia to bring jobs back home for Michigan residents, that's an important fact for people to consider as they evaluate the candidates for governor. Because my opponent, it is true, eliminated jobs in Michigan and did increase investment somewhere else. In that case, it happened to be China. He's concerned about what he believes is misleading what he said. But what's really been misleading is that he's been advertising since February, saying 2 things, saying that he's a jobs maker in Michigan, and that the challenges of Michigan's economy have to do with the fact that jobs are leaving Michigan. He's been telling us this for months and months.
What's wrong with that?
Well, come to find out that he didn't make jobs in Michigan, that in fact, as CEO of Amway, he eliminated jobs in Michigan and created them, thousands of them, in China. Now, you know, he's not the solution to Michigan's problems. He, in fact, has contributed to the problems.
Mr. DeVos.
Governor, I think it is a fact that you did not meet with the officials of Honda, and while in Tokyo, even
that
yourself
is not true.
Well, Tokyo on the second time, and while
but that's not what your ad says, sir.
And in the second on the second visit, while on the radio back to Michigan, said that Honda is going to have to come through Michigan to find to go anywhere else. Well, they came through Michigan, certainly. They came through, and they went south, unfortunately, for all of us in Michigan. And this is once again part of the challenge that we face. The governor has made some assertions that are absolutely untrue, and once again very disappointing, because the facts are very clear, and I've been very clear on the matter.
Mr. DeVos.
Under my company's under my leadership, I took our company to the international market, selling Michigan-made products around the world. This is the record. As a result, we have brought thousands of jobs to Michigan. As a result of our company's investment in China, 400, this is according to the company, 400 jobs exist in Michigan today as a result. And while the company did invest in China, true, the company also invested 3 times as much in Michigan. But the important thing is that we have to look forward. This is a Michigan company positioning itself in the Chinese market, potentially the largest consumer market in the world.
Governor, is
and
that
here's
a lie?
an opportunity for a Michigan company to establish itself and sell our products globally. That's a very important. That's a very important deal.
When he became CEO of Amway, there were 5,300 employees. When he resigned as CEO of Amway, there were 3,900 employees. So
is that true, sir?
Watch,
is that true?
Tim, from the time that I took over as international vice president and led our company to the international markets
of Amway,
and drove the business to the international markets, which now results for about 80% of the company's sales today. As far as that goes, and then in addition, beyond that,
Mr. DeVos, were her number trues on the employment level?
Beyond the employment level, Tim, from the time that I took our company internationally to the time
I'm talking about when you were CEO, sir.
To the time that I left the company, I had created 1,000 jobs at our company, number one. Number two, at the same time, at another company that Betsy and I own, that's in the products and space and storage systems business, that company, we've doubled the size of the employment of that company. And then in addition, having turned around the city of Grand Rapids, along with many others who joined with me to turn around that community, we were able to add what reports are thousands of jobs in Grand Rapids that have been as a result. We've been able to talk about this, and this is the reality of what happens. And this is the reality of a business. When you take leadership and you bring leadership to the international market, selling Michigan-made products around the world, good things happen in Michigan.
Mr. DeVos, we're talking about jobs here, and that clearly, if we look at the polls throughout this campaign season, that trumps all the other issues in the minds of Michigan voters. We lead the nation with 7.1% unemployment. It seems daily we see job losses in the auto industry and in the auto suppliers. And earlier this year, we heard the almost unthinkable, the mention of General Motors in bankruptcy in the same breath. But the question becomes, is a governor responsible? Does a governor design or sell cars here? Does a governor create 50-cent an hour jobs overseas? Does a governor negotiate or enforce trade agreements? How much impact can a Michigan governor have on the state's economy?
I happen to think substantial. And that's why I'm running for governor. I believe that it's a significant difference, and I believe I can make that difference. You know, a governor is responsible for setting the atmosphere of what goes on in this state. And while no governor can control every industry or every business, the governor is responsible for establishing an atmosphere that's going to foster growth and expansion and opportunity. And unfortunately, and very disappointing for so many in Michigan, 85,000 jobs have left Michigan in the last 4 years. Our unemployment rate has, in fact, gone up, highest in the nation. We were about 50, we were a little less than 10% above the national average, so roughly on the national average when the governor took office. And yet now we're over 50% above the national average in unemployment. Foreclosures are 2.5 times the national average. The list goes on and on, Charlie, and it is unfortunate. The atmosphere is clearly not here for job creation. That's why we need leadership who has practical experience, understands the world of business, understands what it takes to create jobs.
Governor, are you not providing the necessary leadership on the job creation front?
We have set in motion the most aggressive economic plan of any state in the nation. This is a plan to create jobs today and invest in our citizens to create jobs tomorrow. It has been set in motion, and it's going to create massive transformation. But truly, truly, this state is challenged because we are and have proudly been for 100 years the automotive capital of the world. We have 700% on average more automotive jobs than any other state in the country. I mean, you can continue to recite the facts about our tough times, and I don't think anybody disagrees. The question is, why did we get here, and how are we going to get out? I encourage citizens to go to my website at granholmforgovernor.com to pull down my economic plan. Very briefly, it involves investing in education, because truly, as we compete not just with Ohio and Indiana, but truly with India and China, we know that we've got to up our standards for what we expect of our high school graduates, double the number of college graduates or those who get technical or vocational certifications. We know that we have to diversify our economy. And this is part of our economic plan. We are investing more than any other state in the country in diversifying our economy, a $2 billion 21st Century Jobs Fund, which is coming from tobacco settlement money. No other state in the country is doing that. We're investing in a revolution in workforce training because of all of the people who've been victimized by this global economy and by these unfair trade agreements. And we are investing in pulling forward I should say $4 billion worth of building projects to put people to work today. All those orange barrels that you see, I'm sorry about that. Everyone means a job, but it's not just roads, it's bridges, older nursing homes. Just 1 second, 40,000 people will be put to work in the next 3 construction seasons. Our plan also involves providing universal access to affordable health care. But the question really is why and how we got here. Before I arrived in this chair, in the last 3 years of John Engler's term, 240,000 jobs were lost, and I stepped into this current. This is a current that no governor, no matter where you are, can stop because governors don't negotiate trade agreements. But here is the very interesting fact in this race, I believe. I'm fighting for everyday citizens. My opponent has fought and lobbied for and benefited from unfair trade agreements that have, I'm sure, helped him, and I'm sure helped Amway, but certainly have not helped Michigan. Let me just tell you a quick story, and I know you're going to get to him, but just quickly. Right here in Michigan, and you guys know this is Greenville, Michigan. Greenville, Michigan is where Electrolux, a refrigerator factory that employed 2,700 people in a town of 8,000. They said they were going to go to Juarez, Mexico because it was easy to do under NAFTA, and they could pay $1.57 an hour. We offered Electrolux 0 taxes to stay. The workers said, we'll take pay and benefit cuts if you just stay. And they said, no, we'll make a greater profit if we go to Juarez, Mexico under NAFTA.
Okay, Mr. DeVos.
My opponent has supported those very policies that have hurt Michigan and benefited from.
Did you support those policies that benefited
policies.
Your company at the expense of Michigan?
Well, let's be very clear about a few things. Certainly one thing is that when the governor took office, I didn't hear any of the caveats that somehow it couldn't get done. In fact, the governor yourself, you said in January when you assumed the office, give us a year and a half and we'll get this economy turned around. And then subsequently in 2004 said it's all fixed and we're ready to go. 2005 is going to be a year of growth. That sadly and disappointingly it wasn't. And so we've got to, this is not new information. And I find it ironic and interesting that the governor speaks about NAFTA when the architect of NAFTA, the promoter of NAFTA, was right here on the governor's behalf in Michigan, Democrat president, former President Bill Clinton, who was the architect and the chief promoter of the NAFTA agreements, who then stands and whom apparently is cooperating and supporting the governor. And so it's very difficult here, Tim, for me to accept responsibility for something the governor's own party
Let me just
advocated.
say, Tim,
quickly.
Tim, because this is, I know you said it's a no-holds barred. Let's be very clear. Under the Clinton administration, they brought enforcement actions. The Bush administration has brought less than a quarter of the enforcement actions under NAFTA, meaning that this trade is a one-way street. My opponent significantly contributed to members of Congress who would support trade with China.
What's wrong with that?
Oh, it would be no big deal if trade with China were a fair an even playing field, but it's not. Let me just give you an example. Chinese are getting ready to sell cars, and when they build them over there and send them over here, they'll be able to pay a 2.5% tariff. But when we build cars and send them over there, it's a 25% tariff, and that is the very policy that he lobbied for millions of dollars when he was CEO of Amway, lobbying for trade with China, which has hurt our automotive industry. The failure to enforce those trade agreements has hurt our automotive industry. And I'm not afraid of trade. Bring it on. We have the best workers on the planet,
Governor,
but you better make sure that that trade is fair.
If you had been governor at the time, would you have signed legislation to abolish the Detroit Board of Education?
No, I would not.
Would you have signed legislation to abolish the GA program?
No. Tim, I wasn't governor at the time. There is no doubt that we need to make sure that public education in Michigan and in our urban centers is supported. But obviously, abolishing the Board of Education, or the takeover is what I assume you're referring to,
yes, ma'am,
did not work.
Mr. DeVos, would you have signed that legislation to reconfigure the Detroit Board of Education, sir?
No, I would not. In fact, I vocally opposed it at the time.
So John Engler was wrong to do that?
Governor Engler made his decision. I opposed it.
Would you have signed legislation to eliminate the GA program?
Yes, I would have.
Would you have signed legislation to boost the tobacco tax by 75 cents, sir?
No, I would not.
What was wrong with that?
Because right now what we've seen is that many of our small businesses across Michigan are paying a huge penalty for a tax increase that is driving sales underground, driving sales across the border south to Indiana, especially if you're in a border community of Michigan. And I've been there. I've traveled all 83 counties of Michigan, and I've heard the business people of Michigan talk to me about the price that they pay because of tax policy that continues to put Michigan at a disadvantage. The single business tax being one example that the governor continued to oppose changing and eliminating the single business tax, which I heard from business people, small business people, medium-sized business people across the state. They wanted those changes. They're very frustrated by the fact that they haven't. They're very disappointed.
Okay, if I could, one more. Would you have signed the legislation to give the suburbs more seats on the Detroit Water Board?
No, I would not have.
You would have vetoed that legislation.
That's correct. And I would have, but there's another step to this, because there's a step of leadership. You know, vetoing something doesn't get something accomplished. It stops something from happening, but it doesn't eliminate a problem. This is not a new problem, and the governor has vetoed this legislation, but has not stepped in and shown the leadership to bring these sides together and the community that shares a valuable resource together to resolve the issue.
Do you believe philosophically that the suburbs, since they're paying the bill, should have more seats on that board to decide how high the bill is going to be?
What I'm suggesting, Tim, is that the legislation that was presented, I would not have signed, but I would provide leadership to get this accomplished. You're proposing one solution and one possible solution, but we need a solution to this problem. The suburbs are concerned. The city is concerned. We have a division between city and suburb that's not serving the people of Michigan. We need to resolve that, and we need real leadership that's going to step up. Somebody who's been there, who's pushed against and worked against trade restrictions that the governor talks about. I've been there, selling Michigan-made products around the world, taking and working against the restrictions that have, I agree, need to be pushed on by this country.
Does that answer sound to you like, Governor, that's leadership on whether the suburbs ought to be on the board?
The suburbs already are part of the consortium that Judge Fikens...
But do they need more seats?
No, but they're part of the consortium that Judge Fikens has put together and that Bill Milliken, he has called in to
Yes, but they don't have a vote on the rate increases.
No, but what they do is, right now, that's exactly what Judge Fikens, who is really the person who's convening all of the players to make sure that it's done fairly. It's under federal court monitor.
I understand.
He's got a process in place, and that's important.
But do you believe philosophically that the suburbs should have a greater voice on that board?
They have a voice on the board.
So it's adequate enough?
It is adequate because under the Constitution, they can't come in and take away the water system that's been invested in by the city of Detroit. It's a constitutional issue. Can I jump back to something that you asked really quick? You said, would I sign a bill abolishing general assistance? Is that what you said? You said the
general assistance, yes.
I just want to be clear. I think welfare reform was a good thing, but I think some of the moves that are going on in the legislature today are not a good thing. It is important for people who can work to be able to work, but there needs to be some exceptions for them, for people who absolutely have barriers to employment, and that's critical. I just wanted to make sure I made that very clear to you. I also think it's very important that the legislature, as a body, send bills to me as governor that move the state forward, and not that divide people city from suburb. It is critical as a state, especially because of our economic challenges, that we move forward together. My opponent has talked about having taken leadership on enforcing trade agreements, I think is what you just said. My opponent has been one of the major advocates for these unfair trade agreements in Michigan. He has lobbied for them, and in fact, he's pretty good at lobbying. He's sort of the poster child for how to manipulate the levers of government in Washington. I don't mean to sound so harsh, but when he was CEO of Amway, he ran a PAC called Alta PAC, and there was something called the Amway Caucus, which still exists in Washington, D.C., of legislators who were doing Amway's bidding. Tom DeLay was part of that caucus. And when he was CEO of Amway in 1997, Amway wanted to get a significant tax break just for Amway. And so in 1997, Mr. DeVos and his family donated $1 million to the Republican National Committee. And within 3 months, Amway got its $19 million tax break. And that $19 million tax break, you never saw it on CNN. You never saw it debated on C-SPAN. It was put into a massive budget bill in the wee hours of the morning by Trent Lott and Newt Gingrich.
What's wrong with that?
Because do the citizens have $1 million to lobby for them? Who's paying that $19 million bill but the citizens?
Is that charge true, Mr. DeVos? Did you buy special treatment for Amway?
This is another disappointing and untrue statement that's being made. And in fact, the company addressed this back in 1997, almost 10 years ago. I did go to Washington. I went to Washington to fight for Michigan jobs because there was a provision of the tax law that would have encouraged our company to build manufacturing overseas. U.S. tax law that would have incentivized us going overseas to build manufacturing. I thought that was wrong. So yes, I did go to Washington. I went to Washington to fight for Michigan jobs and to keep the jobs here. There was no tax break, Governor. There was an avoidance of a penalty that the company never paid and would not have paid. Michigan jobs were created and protected as a result. And in fact, I'm pleased to say that it wasn't about anything to do with this, your so-called Amway caucus. I mean, frankly, those were people who had been in the Amway business. We just had been Amway distributors at some point in their life. We used to just kind of have fun with that. There was no organized caucus of any kind. I worked with, in that particular issue, I worked with Democrat Senator Levin. And ultimately, the legislation was signed by President Bill Clinton. Again, not individuals who have been on my particular donor list. And so
it was inserted in a budget bill in a way that
what we have is
vetoed.
a statement that is disappointing and absolutely untrue. And I think the people of Michigan deserve better. They do deserve the truth.
Governor, last year, Michigan median family income fell below the national average for the first time since records started to be compiled in the 1960s. And we found that Detroit was tied with Cleveland for the poorest big city in the country, and that 13% of Michigan residents were living in poverty. Why are people poor?
People are poor in Michigan because of the challenges to our automotive industry and the loss of jobs in our manufacturing sector. That's obviously one significant factor for Michigan. And that's why I was proud to be able to sign the bill raising the minimum wage, which went into effect yesterday. It's why I'm proud that I was able to sign a bill giving people who are at the poverty level an earned income tax credit. And for citizens, just so that you know what that means, fighting for you, making sure that everyday citizens have a good quality of life. When you file your tax returns next year, you can apply for a state and a federal earned income tax credit. And that means between the state and federal, you could get a check for about $5,000. If you are a family of 4 earning $37,000 a year or less, you can get up to $5,000 per year. Clearly, we've got to do more. But let me just tell you, this is why this economic plan that I have is so promising. We've got a lot of work to do. But we have set in motion this aggressive plan to be able to reshape and transform our future. Michigan's history has been an automotive history, and we love that, but we need to move in new directions. This $2 billion 21st Century Jobs Fund moves us into 4 areas of our economy, areas that will create jobs that won't be outsourced, areas like alternative energy, my personal favorite, life sciences, homeland security and defense, advanced manufacturing. We just had the first round of funding for this $2 billion initiative. 3,000 jobs were created. 61 companies or projects have said they're going to come to Michigan, grow in Michigan, hire people in Michigan in those 4 areas that'll create jobs, again, that won't be outsourced, that our young people will be able to take on. We know that our economy is challenged, but it's also why we have utterly transformed workforce training. We've taken the state of Michigan and divided it into 13 different regions. In each of those regions, we have canvassed the employers. We've learned that there are 92,000 vacancies. We're teaming up with the community colleges to do short-term training and certification of the people who've had the rug pulled out from under them by this global economy, so that they can be placed in areas like healthcare or skilled trades that require some sort of training or certification.
Mr. DeVos, along those lines on the poverty, we've lived for decades in Michigan where a person with only a high school education could go to work in an auto plant, and it was essentially access to the middle class. Those days seem to be gone. Is the middle class in Michigan endangered?
You know, Charlie, I frankly find it amazing to hear the governor say that the plan is working when the people of Michigan aren't. And the people of Michigan are not working, and our young people are leaving because they don't see opportunity here to have the kind of life that their parents had. Apparently, we're 49th in the country in terms of young people who are leaving this state, moving elsewhere because they see hope and opportunity somewhere other than Michigan. Unfortunately, we're 50th in the move-out ratio of families and adults and parents who are leaving Michigan. You know, I'd spoken in Marquette the other day with a young lady and her mother. Her dad was in California, had to close a 3rd-generation family business in Marquette, and they were afraid that pretty soon they were going to have to follow to California and leave the state to be able to sustain themselves and their family. We're very much at risk, and that's why we need a change. That's why we need leadership who understands job creation. That's why we need leadership who can get results for the people of Michigan.
But this is also why we've got to change the mindset in Michigan about what it's going to take to make us competitive. The old solutions are not going to get us out of this problem.
He represents the old solutions?
Yes, he does.
Name
These
2.
The old solutions of unfettered free trade, the old solutions of tax cutting your way to the bottom, when we need to invest our in between the ears, invest in public education. Tim, it's why I proposed, pushed through, and signed into law now what is considered to be the top. We are in the top 3 states in the nation for what we expect of our high school graduates. It's why you ask about the middle class, Charlie. It's why I've asked the legislature repeatedly to pass a $4,000 scholarship for every single child in the state of Michigan to help those middle class parents be able to get their children to go beyond. But this Republican-controlled legislature will not do it. We need to create a Michigan promise. We need to change the paradigm in this state about what's expected. You know, at one of the more recent National Governors Association meetings, Carly Fiorina, who was the CEO of Hewlett-Packard, came to the governors and she talked to us all and she said, you know what, you governors, this is the 21st century. You can keep all the tax cuts you want. I'm going to locate in a place that has the workforce that is capable of taking on the jobs of the 21st century.
Right,
governors, you need to invest in your workforce.
We are halfway through the debate. Mr. DeVos, is the governor indirectly responsible for the death of Ricky Holland and the murders committed by Patrick Selipek?
Yeah, when mistakes happen in some places, in some businesses, nothing bad happens, thankfully. But in this world, and in the world of government, in the world of corrections, in the world of child care, when bad things happen, people can unfortunately lose their lives. And it's not only, and if it was isolated events, I think it would be different. But if it wasn't, it's not Ricky Holland. It's also Rose Kelly. It's also Anisha Moy. I mean, this is a pattern. It's not just Patrick Selipek, it's also Daniel Franklin, who was released erroneously in 2003 and went on to commit 3 murders.
The question, though, is she indirectly responsible?
This is a question of leadership and having the people in place who can get the job done. The people of Michigan need to know that they're going to be safe in their own homes, and they need to be able to trust a governor who's going to get results. Put the people in place to make sure that these tragic things just don't happen again. I have my wife Betsy and we have 4 children, and I have 2 daughters. We just have got to be able to have confidence that our children are safe in Michigan, our most vulnerable.
Sir, with all due respect, do you hold her accountable for those deaths, sir?
I think that any governor and any leader must ultimately stand up and accept responsibility for what happens in their organization. These are tragic things that have happened.
And Governor,
you have to take responsibility, but this is not personal. This is a matter of responsibility of leadership.
Governor?
Tim, I am the former Attorney General, a former federal prosecutor. I'm somebody who has sat with victims of crimes and their families. I'm somebody who knows very well and have prosecuted cases and put bad guys in jail to protect our citizens. There is nobody who knows this better than I do.
But the question was, he says that this was on your watch.
When Patrick Selepak was released, it was a mistake. The Department of Corrections was informed of this mistake, and I ordered the people who were responsible to be fired, and the department reorganized. We then redoubled our efforts at picking up fugitive felons and have now picked up an historic number of fugitive felons. When there is a mistake, we take action, and we do hold ourselves.
Was there a mistake in the Ricky Holland case?
The Ricky Holland case, as you know, is in trial, and there has been no finding of mistake.
Have you been briefed on that case? Have you been briefed on the case?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so was there a mistake made?
Again, that's in trial right now, and the ombudsperson has been told to hold that until the trial is through, and it comes out as a result of the request of the prosecutor in Ingham County. But let me just say about Ricky Holland or any others, there is nothing that cuts deeper than the death of a child or the injury of a child, especially in foster care or in child protective services. When I got to this office, John Engler had an early out. There were 4,000 Department of Human Services workers who took that early out. When I got in this chair, I inherited a $4 billion budget deficit. Nonetheless, we said we are going to make sure that we've got child protective services workers in place, and we're going to overhaul the department. We have increased
Governor,
training.
you didn't even recommend any increases in that budget.
We just hired a bunch of new people.
Yes, but you didn't recommend it to the legislature.
Yes, this time.
The time before, you said they did, but you didn't, and the Republicans put that in the bill.
No. We supported the increase in the number of we just hired 51 child protective services workers.
But prior to that.
And prior to that, Tim, as you know, I inherited a $4 billion budget deficit.
I understand,
the largest
but prior
budget
to that,
deficit
you had not
of
recommended
any state in the country, and a legislature that was not willing to look at other forms of revenue, as you know. But here we have a situation where we ordered the overhaul of child protective services. And in the ordering of that overhaul, we have trained workers both on child protection and foster care with the Michigan State Police. We have ordered the background checks of foster families not just once a year, but once a month.
Okay, so bottom line, on these cases, your hands are clean.
Well, Tim, there is no doubt that if there is were mistakes made in either of these departments, certainly in the case of Department of Corrections, they were repaired. In the case of the Department of Human Services, it's been an ongoing effort to overhaul child protective services. But I must say this. My opponent has suggested a tax scheme that would alleviate business taxes, $2 billion in the budget deficit. I don't know how much he intends to replace of that with a business tax. But if you end up cutting more out of state government like that, you are going to put children at risk. We need to have a single business tax replacement that creates a tax that is competitive, that is fair, that is low, that is more focused on profit. My opponent has not put any plan on the table for what he would replace the now defunct single business tax.
Going back to public safety, just before we get back to the single business tax, last year we saw an increase in serious crime. I think there were 56,000 violent felonies in the state of Michigan. Yet if we look what's happened since 9/11, there are 1,500 fewer police officers on the streets of Michigan, and we lose an officer every 28 hours, in large part because the state has clipped back on $1.5 billion worth of revenue sharing to the states. Isn't that also endangering public safety?
In the past couple of years, we've held revenue sharing harmless, but their costs, local community costs, go up, and so that is effectively
well, and then also the statutory requirements. Had it been fully funded, it'd be that $1.5 billion.
Let's be clear, too, that the federal government has slashed local community police officer funding. We only get 60% of what we used to get for community police officers. Detroit only gets 25% of what it used to get. That compounds the issue. But be very clear about this. When I got into this chair, you all remember I inherited the largest budget deficit that any governor in the history of Michigan has ever inherited. And it's true, I cut everything because there wasn't a way, and we trimmed and tried to preserve the things that citizens value. But when you combine the cuts from the federal government, as well as the challenges that I inherited because my predecessor left me with, frankly, a mess, that there is no doubt that many local units of government got cut. But we can't continue to do that if we want to have a quality of life that we invest in. And I, again, challenge my opponent to tell us exactly and specifically what he would do to fill the now $2 billion hole that has been created by the reckless act of the legislature in eliminating the business taxes without saying what's going to replace it. And Wall Street has put us on a negative watch as a result of that reckless act that was supported by my opponent.
Mr. DeVos, how much do you favor replacing once we do away with the SBT? And if it is $1 billion short of what we're currently taking in, where do you propose we make $1 billion worth of cuts?
Well, Charlie, I think the governor once again is it's just so disappointing to hear continued references to what happened 4 years ago. And when violent crime is up 12%, as you point out, just last year, I want a governor who's going to take responsibility and who's going to step up and fix things and move us forward and not blame Washington and blame everywhere else. You know, citizens of Michigan are pretty good at figuring out blame. They know how to get that done. What they want solutions, and they want answers, and they want our streets safe, and they want our children to be protected. And that's critically important, and that's why I've proposed an SBT replacement. I've been very, very clear about an SBT replacement plan. And here are the components. Number one is it needs to be a business-based tax. Now, there are some who have advocated otherwise, but I said replace a business tax with a business tax. Second thing, don't go over and try to penalize or tax the families of Michigan. Keep it focused on business. Three, I've said at least the majority of the income has to be replaced. Now, we have to work out the details of where that level is to assure the next component that is a broad-based competitive tax that is going to serve the people of Michigan and job creation. This is a tax that has driven jobs out of Michigan. It's good that it's gone. I'm proud to have taken it out, and now I'm pleased for the discussion for a solution. I haven't heard the governor's specific plan to replace the SBT either.
Let me be specific. I'm happy to tell you.
But it's very important that we get on with this to settle this and to bring certainty to the people of Michigan. SBT is gone. Let's move on to the replacement. I've put forward a specific plan.
This is the first I've heard of the specific plan, if that's specific. In fact, the previous times you've ever been asked about it, you've been telling people that you'll tell people after the election what your specific plan is. My specific plan is to lower the rate, to restructure the tax entirely, take it down to about 1.2% from 1.9%. That's a 37% cut, to weight it more toward profit and less toward compensation, to remove some of the unusual loopholes that have been carved into this tax over the past 30 years. And let me just say that again, the single business tax has been around for 30 years. The Republicans had control of the governor's office and the House and the Senate for long before I got there, for many, many years, 8 at least, 12 with John Engler being governor. And if it were the reason that Michigan's economy was challenged, I'm sure it would have been gone long ago. It needed to be replaced. And I have a specific replacement called the Michigan Jobs and Investment Act to do that. My opponent, and I'm glad you have some principles at least that you say, but even to cut half of this tax, another $1 billion out of state government, would hurt public safety. It would hurt health care for vulnerable citizens. It would hurt Education, at a time when we have to invest in higher education to get more of our children there. To suggest that you can just willy-nilly cut $1 billion out of state government when we've already cut more than any governor in the history of Michigan is it's just not responsible, and it's not doable. And I really encourage the citizens to take a look at this, because what he says and what he does are two different things.
Well, the governor hasn't characterized my plan correctly. What I said was we have to replace at least half, and that I believe that we will be able to preserve, and I've said this publicly and consistently, that we can preserve essential services as we reduce government spending. You know, even the governor quoted a gentleman the people of Michigan have become reacquainted with lately named Lee Iacocca, who said if you can't find 5% in a budget in any given year, then you probably ought to move me on. Well, he agreed. He made that statement. The governor agreed. There is fat in the government that can be reduced. We can get after this without reducing essential services, Governor, in any way.
Is your opponent deliberately staying away from some issues in order to get elected?
Yes, I think he is. I really do. In fact, let me give you one example of an issue that I think he's staying away from and that I think citizens ought to know about. I've asked for him to release his tax returns, like all governors in recent memory have done. I've certainly done it. You know, it's hard to release your tax returns. You don't want your laundry aired before everybody. I understand that. But when you're the governor, you're working for the citizens, and the citizens deserve to know who you're working for. Well, he did not do that. So instead what he did was to release a document that he claims was the most comprehensive document that included all of his assets and liabilities and contributions, went back to 1997. Well, I was looking at that document this weekend, and I noticed that it wasn't so comprehensive. In fact, there was a major omission, and that omission was that Mr. DeVos and his family had invested almost $200 million in a nursing home chain called Altera, a chain that treated Alzheimer's patients, but a chain that had been alleged, and it had been substantiated, that it permitted the sexual and physical abuse of those Alzheimer's patients. Now, he didn't include that in his comprehensive disclosure. And obviously, he wouldn't want us to know about that. And so my concern is that there are other things in his failure to disclose that we may not know about.
What is the specific allegation you're making about that investment then?
The allegation is that this was an investment that was not disclosed like all of the other ownership interests that he had in companies.
Because?
Because perhaps, I mean, you'd have to ask him, perhaps because you didn't want people to know about the allegations of sexual and physical abuse of the seniors who were in that center, that chain. $200 million almost, or maybe 170 million, I think it's a big investment even for you. And so my question to you is, what else is not being disclosed?
I'm happy to respond to that, Governor, because what you've done is, again, you're bringing apples and oranges. My disclosure, called by Common Cause here in Michigan as the most complete disclosure of anything that any previous candidate for governor, laying out all of the ownership interests that I have, being very clear about that so the people of Michigan know. Because if I have a conflict of interest of any kind, I want it on the table, and I want it clear so people know exactly that I work for the people of Michigan. I'm not accepting any special interests for any special interest contributions. I made a decision not to accept special interest money, PAC money, to my candidacy because I want it to be very clear, the people of Michigan, who I work for. And so I did release every holding that I have. Yes, we've had investments in the past, numerous investments that have come and that have gone. What I released was a complete disclosure of the holdings that I have and the holdings that I have today. And I would update that disclosure on a regular basis to be sure.
Were you aware of this nursing home problem that the hospital's treating Alzheimer's patients? Are you aware of this case?
I became aware of it just recently, as a matter of fact, of the challenges and the allegations of this sad situation. In that particular case, I did investigate. It was a publicly held company. There were numerous shareholders, and for me and my family, my holdings were less than 1% of that company, and so it was a tragic situation, to be sure, and it turned out to be a very bad investment as well. So it was a very, very unfortunate set of circumstances. My holdings as a public shareholder with no interest beyond just being a public shareholder, when I became aware of it, I was very saddened too.
But didn't you own 12 million shares? Didn't you own 12 million shares?
Governor, I don't know what the share total was. I don't know what the shareholders of the company. I know this. I know I owned less than 1% of that company's outstanding shares. Less than 1%.
Well,
so
the concern that I have is
again, it's disappointing, the kind of allegations that are being made without the facts to back it up, unfortunately.
The concern is that when you say that you fully released in your disclosure form, I thought it went back to 1997.
No, ma'am, never said that.
I must have misread.
No, it was very clear.
But Mr. DeVos has talked about.
I disclosed two things. I disclosed we disclosed where we had contributed funds, and we disclosed where we had what holdings that I had. So that the people of Michigan, it'll be very clear to them, Governor, where a conflict may exist, and if it does, I'll fix it.
Governor, some of your critics contend that you have modified some of your personal beliefs because it would cost you votes. Are you guilty of that, ma'am?
I have no idea what you're talking about, Tim. Give me an example of what you mean.
Reparations, 10 Commandments in the Capitol, creating more charter schools in Detroit, and dove hunting.
All right, let's go down the list. Reparations, I've never favored cash reparations.
But in your first statement, you did not say that.
Well, let me be clear. I believe that repairing the world means that we ought to be supporting affirmative action. And by the way, let me take this opportunity to say that I hope, and I believe my opponent and I, when we may disagree on a few things, we do agree that people should vote no on Proposal 2, which is the anti-affirmative action.
So you didn't change your position on reparations?
No, my position on reparations has been clear, that we need to repair the vestiges of slavery, and affirmative action is one way to do it. Cash reparations is not. What was the second
10
one?
Commandments in the Capitol?
Well, 10 Commandments, I think you were there when I first made a statement about not having a problem with it. Learned that it was up at the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court gave us guidance about how to do it in a way that's constitutional and in a way that protects the pluralism, which is our country. So I think that that's in fact what the Capitol Committee is looking at right now.
Just a second. You said in that first interview that you favored displaying them in the Capitol, and then 3 days after you said you were not speaking as governor, you were speaking as a person. Well, some people in this town thought that was a spin.
We need to be able to do it in a way that preserves the Constitution.
I understand. So, I'm asking, did your position change? Did your personal
I believe in the 10 Commandments, Tim, but I think as governor, we've got to do it in a way that preserves the Constitution. The Supreme Court came down with guidance. But the question was, ma'am, with all due respect, did your personal convictions change because it was going to cost you votes? No.
Okay, Mr. DeVos, do you believe that she has done that for votes?
Tim, the governor has to be accountable for her personal convictions and her decisions in that regard. I don't know her heart, and so I can't say. I just leave that to the governor and the people of Michigan to decide.
By the same token, have you stayed away from some social issues because you are afraid of losing votes?
Tim, I haven't stayed away from any issue. I've been traveling. Right. I've been traveling 83 counties.
I understand.
Michigan,
what is your position
listening to people and talking to them and answering every question they have to ask.
Okay, your position on gay marriage then?
I have joined the people of Michigan and spoke out clearly that I was opposed to gay marriage. The people of Michigan agreed.
Exceptions of rape and incest and abortion. I'm
on the pro-life side of that debate, Tim. I think that's been very clear from the start.
So you do not favor the exceptions for rape and rape and incest?
My position on the life question and the abortion question, well, it's different people have different views, of course. My position is consistent with many individuals across the aisle. I mean, even the governor's own self-proclaimed mentor, the former Attorney General Frank Kelly, shares the same position, as well as a couple of congressmen from your side of the aisle, Governor. So my position is consistent with theirs as well. That has an exception for the life of the mother, but where life has been created, we have great concern about losing it.
I think that's just far out of the mainstream. I think that in the case of rape or incest, there's no exception. I think that government should not be in the doctor's office or in the confessional or in your bedroom. And I just think that is it's a pretty astonishing position, frankly.
A question of life.
But it is consistent. I mean, it is consistent position with people with people of conscience in both sides of the aisle, inclusive of some very good friends of the governor, whom I think the governor would also respect as being in the mainstream. And the governor's veto on the same issue, of course, as we deal with abortion and the very difficult issue of abortion, the governor's veto of partial birth abortion, which many in Michigan, I think the overwhelming majority, find to be just a tragic and unacceptable procedure. The governor's veto of a partial birth abortion bill would suggest that quite possibly the governor is way out of the mainstream.
No, I said, wait, let me just say this. I've said repeatedly that I don't think partial birth abortion is a good thing, but the bill that was sent to me did not have an exception for the life or the health of the mother, and those exceptions have to be in it in order for it to be constitutional.
What about embryonic stem cell research? You're opposed to it across the board, Mr. DeVos?
I'm a great fan of stem cell research.
Embryonic.
There's been great progress with stem cell research, but I have great concerns, again, like many citizens of Michigan, concerns about when we talk about the loss of life and the loss of an embryo. We need to focus on the things that we can all agree on. What we all agree on is that that stem cell research offers great promise, and we all agree on that, while we have concerns about the embryonic portion. And the governor has not shown leadership to move us forward. And something that we can all agree on, which is that adult stem cell research has had results with leukemia and with reducing the symptoms of Parkinson's disease and a number of other proven cures already. We have work to be done in this area of adult stem cell research, and let's come together on something that we can all agree on.
Governor?
Great, let's come together on adult stem cell research, but I think that, again, this is out of the mainstream to, assuming that people agree that it is okay for infertile couples to seek help at a fertility clinic, and that in order to do that you have to create additional embryos, and that when the parents decide that they are not going to use the extra embryos and that they can be discarded, when the parents have made that decision and you're not creating an embryo for the purpose of doing research, but you're taking embryos that were going to be discarded for the purpose of saving lives, like Alzheimer's or spinal cord injuries or MS or juvenile diabetes. I mean, to me, in my opinion, to be pro-cure is to be pro-life.
Candidates, we have 2 minutes left. Mr. DeVos, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most, when it comes to making critical decisions, how much influence will your spouse have in making that decision, sir?
Critical decisions with regard to politics, I have great respect for my wife's ability in that area, and I love my wife very, very much.
So that's a 10?
As governor, and as a process of being governor, I will seek the advice of those who are very much involved with government and the issues of government, and will rely on their advice and counsel. I'll surround myself with great people.
But could I try to refine that answer, please, sir? On a scale of 1 to 10, how important is her input in making critical decisions?
My wife is a great person and very wise and offers me wise counsel, and so I take her advice very, very much. Her interest, however, tends to be in politics more than in governing. She's been a wonderful counselor for this political season.
And Governor, the influence of your spouse in making critical decisions?
Well, clearly with respect to the family, it's a 10 because he has quit his...
But this is in government and or politics.
Well, I know. I was just following the line. I think that with respect to the family, he's a 10. And, it's hard to put a number on it. He's my best friend, and he certainly
When you're making critical decisions, is he the last person you talk to?
Not necessarily. I mean, I'm the governor. I make the decisions, and I consult those who are experts in whatever area. But, having a spouse that is a good friend and a good thinker and somebody who has a great gut instinct about fighting for everyday citizens, that's an important factor for me. Somebody who's a faithful person is an important factor for me. And so I do consult him, but I'm the governor and I consult with a lot of people. He's one of the people I consult with.
You've got a quick one, Charlie, 30 seconds.
Tell us something about yourself that would surprise viewers quickly. Mr. DeVos.
Oh, the surprise viewers, I don't know, that I did 3 triathlons this summer as a way of keeping in shape and a way of challenging myself to get out and to stay in good shape. I think we have to be responsible for our health.
I was sort of chuckling because I was thinking about my husband and faith, and you know, I joke about this a lot. My father is an elder, my brother's an ordained minister, and my husband was going to become a Catholic priest, but then we met, and that didn't work out. Praise the Lord.
Candidates, we have 1 minute for closing statements. By a flip of the coin, Governor, you'll go first, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Tim and Charlie, and thank you all for listening. I know we've gone back and forth here, and I'm not sure that we got into as much detail about the economic agenda that I would like, but there'll be a couple more debates. I want you to take away this. I am a governor who is going to fight for everyday citizens. My economic plan and every piece of it is all about fighting for everyday citizens, providing opportunity for you, for your family, for your children to be competitive in this global economy. My opponent is somebody who has lobbied for the policies that got Michigan into this challenging situation to begin with, the policies of unfair trade. It may have benefited him, but his gain has been Michigan's pain. You don't need a fancy lobbyist in Washington. You have me. I'm going to fight for you, and I ask for your vote on November 7th.
All right, just to be fair, you have 15 seconds left, I think. Do you want to take them or not?
Well, I thank you all for listening, and I look forward to coming back and having debate number 2 and 3, and hopefully further getting into the economic plans of both of us.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Mr. DeVos, please.
Thank you very much, Tim and Charlie. Thanks to WKAR, and thank you, Governor, for being here this evening. You know, the Governor said herself 4 years ago that this is about who gets it done. And the people of Michigan are sorely disappointed that it hasn't gotten done as we see our jobs leaving the state. And that's why I'm running for governor, a proven jobs maker, an independent leader who's turned around a company, helped turn around a community, and who can bring that same experience to Lansing. An individual who's prepared to serve. And so I'm applying for the job of governor. I'm asking for you to hire me. I'm asking for your vote so that together we can turn Michigan around. We can move Michigan in the right direction, and that together we can be proud once again.
Candidates, thank you very much for your closing comments and also for your answers to our questions. We appreciate you being here tonight. Also, thanks to Charlie Kane for the questions. And thank you for watching. Don't forget, there's 2 more debates in this race for governor. Watch them. I'm Tim Skubic. Thanks for watching, and good night.
Production of the Debate for Governor 2006 is made possible by a grant from the Rossman Group, a full-service Lansing-based public relations firm providing consulting services to a broad range of local and statewide clients.